Hello and welcome to this exclusive webinar for NHT and Youth Sport Trust members. My name is Steve Darby and I'm head teacher of Oakwood Junior School in Derby and a head teacher ambassador for the YST. Joining me this morning to discuss current issues in the world of PE and school sport is the YST chair, Baroness Sue Campbell.
Good morning.
Hello, Sue.
Hello.
So tell us about the current issues regarding physical inactivity amongst children and the impact it's having upon them.
Well, we're seeing a continual growth in the number of young people that are living very sedentary lives, and we can understand why, really. We've had the emergence of this digital generation, really, that spend an enormous amount of time on their screens. I think the latest average is that they spend around 6 hours a day in front of some sort of screen, whether that's a digital screen or a television screen. So that inactivity is getting built into their daily lives. So we're seeing both in boys and girls a decline in activity, but particularly bad with young girls. The impact it's having is very much linked initially to their well-being, their physical and emotional well-being. We know that if you're inactive, you physically probably are declining, and physical inactivity and physical illness actually will detract from learning. So for teachers and for head teachers, it isn't that we want you to be the health experts, but we do want you to understand that when kids are physically and emotionally not at their best, they're probably not going to be good learners. They're not going to concentrate well, they're not going to be able to sustain concentration till the afternoon. There's a huge link between cognitive skills and physical activity. So it's massively important as a health issue, but it's massively important as an education issue.
So what are the government doing to try and address these issues?
Well, there's a lot going on at the minute. You're probably very familiar with the PE and sport premium that has gone into primary schools. And clearly that is an attempt to improve the quality of physical education, increase the amount of sport beyond the curriculum time, and also to drive physical activity. And over the last few years, there has also been a discrete piece of money put into schools by the Department of Health through the Youth Sport Trust called Change for Life, which has been to establish Change for Life clubs alongside the PE and sport premium for those kids who are least active. So there is a real commitment by the Department of Health and a real commitment from DFE to increase both the PE and school sport agenda in our primary schools.
And is there anything that will support initial teacher training institutions in their delivery of PE and their training of teachers regarding physical education in the future?
It's a great question. My answer would be not enough. When the PE and sport premium first came out, the department instigated some new initiatives around specialist primary PE teachers, which were not just doing PE, they were also primary teachers, but with a long period of study in physical education. That's now dissipated a little bit, but that gave us quite a number of young people out in the system who have trained specifically to deliver physical education. For the majority of teachers going through initial teacher training, the amount of time they have is inadequate. They therefore come out lacking confidence. And if they've never played or been active themselves, they also lack the competence to deliver. So it's a little bit like asking someone who's illiterate to go into primary schools to teach literacy. It's a very complex issue. And I agree with you completely that the question you're asking is that we need to do more in initial teacher training, not less, in terms of getting our primary teachers equipped to deliver good quality physical education, school sport, and at least have an interest in getting kids physically active.
And this is where the sports premium is of pivotal importance, isn't it? With that opportunity for schools to use it to train the staff that they have got, as opposed to just using it to I don't know, cover PPA time.
Yeah, unfortunately, I mean, the Department for Education has now said, actually on its website, that you're not allowed to use this money for PPA time, but that's 2 years after the horse has bolted. And unfortunately, a lot of people have done that. My view is the success of this investment It's not just more physical education, more sport, more activity, but it's whether we've skilled up the teaching workforce, and whether the teaching workforce has not just got more skilled, but actually really recognises the value of physical education in that rounded educational development. And when we question teachers who perhaps were somewhat resistant to teaching physical education, perhaps their own experience wasn't good, didn't get good initial training, as we've talked about, one of the things that they all say to us is that when they go through that and they go through the training and they come out the other side, that actually they're better all-round teachers, not just better in PE, but they're better all round. They build different relationships with children in that outdoor environment. They learn new pedagogical skills. So it's not just a short-term thing about delivering better PE. It's about creating a more rounded teaching profession.
And a more sustainable one.
Absolutely.
In terms of physical education.
No, you're absolutely right. I mean, the coaches that are coming in, that are being paid to come in, are certainly not going to come in when there isn't any money. And if you substitute coaches for teachers now, you're actually de-skilling our profession. You're not skilling our profession. And when that money stops, we'll go backwards, not forwards. We've got to use this time to take the profession forwards, not backwards.
We'll move on to the obesity strategy, the impending obesity strategy that we'll be hearing about in the news. I want to know what that might mean for my school, and can that really impact on whole school improvement?
Well, the Secretary of State for DH, Jeremy Hunt, is very committed to school sport. He played a very significant part in establishing the school games, and he played a significant part. He funds 50% of the PE and sport premium, something a lot of people don't know, that the Department of Health funds 50% of that. So he's very committed to physical activity. I think, from what I understand, the obesity strategy will be out in the next few weeks, although we've been saying that for a few weeks, but I understand it will be now out fairly soon. And that the main emphasis in terms of young people will be preschool and primary, looking at getting the lifestyle right as early as we can. And so what we're trying to do, what the obesity strategy is trying to do, is encourage parents and schools to recognise the Chief Medical Officer's recommendation of an hour of physical activity a day. That can't all be delivered in school, but can it be delivered through active travel to school, better playground development, early morning classes, breakfast clubs, after school activity. So if you include PE, your PE time and your school sport time, we're looking to extend that to make sure every youngster is getting an hour of physical activity a day. What difference will that make? Well, the easiest example to give you is we did some work, the Youth Sport Trust did some work on lunchtime development, and one of the things we did was increase the amount of activity at lunchtime. What were the two biggest findings? Far better concentration in the afternoon, far better behaviour in the afternoon, because that release of energy at lunchtime helps the mind focus and settle for an afternoon of study. So I don't think all of this is just about physical activity. It truly underpins learning.
And is there anything specific that the Youth Sport Trust are able to do to support schools with the obesity strategy?
Well, we have obviously, the Change for Life clubs are now in 10,500 primary schools, and we'd like to continue to develop that programme and to provide support and resources to schools, which we will be doing in the future. But we've also, because of the demand from head teachers, we've also developed a tool to help measure impact. Because one of the questions that colleagues of yours have asked us is, well, this is all well and good, but how do we measure the impact that this is having? Is it really affecting thinking skills, creative skills, social skills, as well as physical activity? So we've developed a tool called Skills to Achieve, and it's a very simple online tool that both the teacher can access, the pupil can access, the parents can access, so that you can get a very rounded picture of the kind of levels that kids are going through, so you can understand the progression, but you can also see the impact it's having in the more rounded sense on young people.
I mean, that would be really good to get some tangible evidence.
It would.
To make that link between physical education and school sports and its impact on standards.
Yeah.
I mean, personally, I have no doubt, and I have seen that in my school, but that's only anecdotal evidence, isn't it? It's really important if people can see that connection and that message starts coming through.
I think it's probably worth just saying, prior to our focus on primary, we've done a huge amount of work over the last 20 years in secondary schools. And one of the initiatives that you remember under the Labour government was to have specialisms, you know, whether that was technology or language or maths. And our job at the Youth Sport Trust was to look after those with sport as a specialism. And the whole point of them was to use PE and sport to drive whole school improvement. And I don't think it was any coincidence that from 2004 to 2008, those 500 schools with that focus were the fastest improving of all schools in the country. Fastest at improving more than technology or maths or languages. I don't think that's a coincidence. I think that 1 year might have been a coincidence, 2 years might have been a bit of luck, 4 years says to me that you get this right and you will drive whole school standards. So we mustn't forget the lessons we've learned in other parts of the system.
Okay. I know we've spent some time with Nicky Morgan at our National Talent Camp just before Christmas, and she shared a continued commitment to character development in schools. Can you tell us a bit more about this?
Well, I think we all know that you and your colleagues are under massive pressure to achieve exam results, both in primary and secondary. And I think secondary particularly, what we're seeing that increased pressure is beginning to affect the emotional well-being. So if in primary, you know, we want to get it physically, socially and emotionally right, by the time we get to secondary, the big issue now is emotional challenges that head teachers, they'll talk about lack of resilience, they'll talk about kids with, you know, they talk to me about kids being flimsy in terms of not having that resilience and ability to cope with things. There's a whole set of reasons for that. Again, we go back to the digital world for some of them. But what I think Nicky is concerned with is how do we, alongside the development of academic standards, how do we develop the personality, the characteristics that will, one, help our kids be emotionally better, and secondly, will, in your terms, help them be secondary ready, and in secondary school terms, help them be employable. Because those are the key issues. It isn't, you know, if you talk to the CBI or you talk to secondary schools, they're not actually just only looking at exam results, they're looking at those personal skills. And that's where I think PE and sport can play a massive role in helping develop those skills, you know, because most of the time kids now live in a virtual world on a digital gadget. You know, the challenge is how do we get them into the real world of having to look someone in the eye, develop empathy, understand how to support each other, understand how to argue and agree on arguments, not just simply send a message down here and not get an argument back, or indeed a consequence back from behaviour that you might exhibit on your digital device. So I think PE and sport's really powerful. And we're doing some work in secondary schools in Key Stage 3 particularly, and we're looking at the transition from primary to secondary about how we really use PE and sport to improve some of those characteristics. So resilience, determination, aspiration, compassion, all of those things. How can we make those an outcome from our PE lesson rather than simply we dribbled round cones, as important as that may be to some people? How do we make sure those other lessons are being learned? That's when we really draw out the power of this subject to make a difference.
And on a very practical level, and particularly for head teachers, there's a lot of and I know we don't do things for Ofsted, but Ofsted is there, and a lot of what you've been saying could address a lot of the issues that Ofsted might raise within schools, and certainly when schools are looking at self-evaluation and in terms of well-being and self-esteem of children, there's a massive amount that can come from school sport and physical education.
There is, but the only caveat I'll add is there is if the teacher is teaching it well. Or you know, and I think what we've got to do is make sure both in primary and secondary that our PE lessons are not just generating physical activity, they're generating these other outcomes that we're all looking for, and not make an assumption that they happen simply because we're doing it. In other words, we've always said, oh well, sport does that. Well, it does it intrinsically, but are we making it extrinsic enough that kids really understand it? Do they take it back down the corridor with them? when they're coming away from the PE lesson. What have we really taught in terms of those skills and characteristics that you're talking about? And you know, for the first time, as you know, Ofsted now are inspecting in primary because of the PE and sport premium. They are asking questions about physical education, and they are asking about its impact on education and on health. And I think that's the message I'd want to give, is that the impact of the PE and sport premium isn't just more sport. It's, are you using it to tackle the education and health issues in your school? Are you targeting it perhaps at the kids that need it most? Are you thinking about where to use it to improve behaviour, parental engagement, truancy, all those issues that worry you? That's where the PE and sport premium needs to evidence that it can have a massive impact on education, attainment, and on the health of kids.
So currently there's an awful lot going on, and it's a pivotal time for schools to counteract physical inactivity. If you had to give schools 3 top tips, what would they be? So,
well, number 1 would be come to our conference, because on March the 3rd we've got a fantastic conference with 3 great speakers. One looking at the impact of the digital world on young people's learning and development, which I think's Baroness Susan Campbell's outstanding. She's our number 1 neuroscientist, and I think she'll present a fantastic session. We've got William Bird, Dr. William Bird, talking about physical activity and the strategies we might want to use to increase that. And then finally, at the end of the day, we've got Tim Shriver, whose name won't be familiar, but he is the global president of Special Olympics, the nephew of John Kennedy, and he's coming to talk about inclusion. So and there's lots of opportunity in between to network. So my number 1 tip is, really, I know how busy head teachers are, I know how challenged you are, but use the opportunity to really explore this. You know, this is I know I'm joking to say come to the conference, I do mean that, but I'm saying explore the power of PE in sport. Don't just spend the money, really think of it as an investment in education. And I'm really passionately keen that at the end of the PE and sport premium, which will probably be 2020, that we've really transformed the position of PE in our primary schools, not merely done a lot more of it. So that's number 1. Really explore this and get your head around some of these issues. You know, I know as head teachers it's very demanding, but I believe this is a tool for you to use to help you achieve your objectives. And number 2 is work with us at the Youth Sport Trust, but most importantly, work with colleagues. You know, we're really good at providing support for networks and clusters, because often in a primary school, you're working in a community and it's bigger than you, and it's how you work with the other primary and secondary schools to address some of those wider community issues. And again, I think that's where PE and sport can have such a massive impact, not just in physical activity, but in building the relationships with the community, you know, whether that's parental engagement, whether that's cohesion within a particular community where there's maybe different divides. I just think there's a real power there. So networking, working together, building alliances. And my 3rd one, I guess, would be to really gather the impact for yourself, but for all of us, so that the case for physical education, school sport and physical activity in the future isn't lost. Because right now we've got the most astonishing amount of investment in our primary schools we've ever had. I couldn't have dreamed of it 30, 40 years ago. At the end of it, we've got to have proved that we can make an education and health difference to our children. So gather the impact, whether that's using our tools that we've got or somebody else's.
And at the end of the day, that is extremely important, isn't it? What it's all
Absolutely.
about, isn't it? So thank you very much. That was extremely useful. I hope everybody has found this input useful, and you'll be able to take along some of the ideas from this update. Thank you very much.